and then everyone started talking about it. We went back and watched a few more movies. You thought Clint Eastwood was calm, wise, and untouchable, but you were incorrect. The icon eventually took off his mask at 95, showing a side that was darker than anyone could have imagined. He's naming 6 celebs who turned their backs on him when he needed them the most. They were with him while he was famous and successful, but then they stabbed him in the back. And once you hear their names, you'll know why Clint Eastwood never forgave or forgot. First place goes to Leonardo DiCaprio, the golden boy. Clint Eastwood never forgave. What might make Clint Eastwood leave his own movie set? Leonardo DiCaprio is the answer. Everyone felt it was a dream couple when J. Edgar started filming in 2010, the calmest director in Hollywood and the most impassioned actor. But many who were there say it turned into a quiet horror. DiCaprio came to work with folders full of notes, pages of historical study, and even marked up FBI papers from the start. Crew members stated Clint lost his temper quickly. He walked in like a detective trying to figure me out. Clint is said to have made a joke once, although I wasn't the case. There was frustration behind the comedy, and it was becoming worse. Then came the scene where the emotional collapse happened. Leo did it perfectly in one try. Raw, real, faultless. The room stopped. Clint said, "Perfect. Cut." But Leo wanted more and more. Clint was no longer behind the camera by the 6th. He was leaning on the work table with a cup of coffee in his hand and a stone face. Someone wanted to know if he was okay. He only grumbled, "He's still looking for something I already found." There was only silence after the filming was over. The kind of silence Clint has. Casting meetings after that went the same way. There was DiCaprio's name. Clint shook his head. He'd say, "Great actor, but not my type." They've never seen each other again, shared a stage, or even spoken since. Years later, Leo earned his Oscar, but he never heard from Eastwood again. Clint doesn't think that doing it again is what makes it perfect. It's about doing it once and not wasting any more time. 2. Michael Moore, the guy who went too far with Clint. As soon as Michael Moore linked Clint Eastwood's American Sharpshooter to Nazi propaganda, he might as well have shot a friendship that never happened. Clint was there, but he didn't yell. He basically left him alone forever. They had fought before. It had been building since 2005, when Eastwood stood on stage at the National Board of Review Awards and said, "If Michael Moore ever comes to my door with a camera, I'll kill him." Everyone in the room laughed nervously. Clint didn't. He looked straight ahead and walked off the stage. It wasn't a joke. It was a line in the sand. You need to know what Clint stands for to comprehend the resentment, discipline, old-fashioned honor, and quiet duty. He thought Moore's documentaries, notably Fahrenheit 9/11, were just a way for him to show off, with politics posing as art. He thinks of soldiers like pieces on a chessboard. In a rare moment of anger, Eastwood told a buddy, "I see them as heroes." It was about respect. Then, over 10 years later, Moore made fun of American Sniper online, saying it was like the Nazi sniper movie and Inglourious Bastards. He maintained it was simply a joke, but Clint's people said he was quite angry. One longtime co-worker said, "He doesn't forget insults. He deletes them," and that's what he did. Moore's name has been out of Clint's orbit since that tweet. Eastwood has worked with both liberals and conservatives, but he won't deal with anyone who makes fun of soldiers. For him, Moore didn't just cross it, he spit on it. If you bring up Michael Moore in front of Clint today, the conversation stops. Barbra Streisand, the perfectionist who made the cowboy angry, is number 3. Barbra Streisand is the one name that still makes Clint Eastwood's jaw tighten after 9 decades in Hollywood. She got under his skin so much that he won't even speak her name in interviews. And their fight turned into one of the coldest battles in Hollywood. It started in the early 1980s when both of them were going from acting to directing. Streisand was the queen of power. It can take 40, 50, or even 60 takes to get one expression. Clint did things the other way around. 2 tries at most, then go on. He used to say, "If it's not real the first time, it's not worth filming." Barbara was everything he didn't like about the new Hollywood. Control, pride, and thinking too much all the time. By the beginning of the 1990s, their innovative ideas had transformed into open hatred. Eastwood was heard telling a friend that maybe if she made decisions faster, she'd finish more than 3 movies in 15 years when The Prince of Tides didn't get Streisand a Best Director nod in 1992. It spread across the business like wildfire. Then came the bridges of Madison County, which disrupted whatever little piece was left. Streisand had been set to direct it, but he quit after years of not being able to make up his mind. Eastwood came in, revised the script, and made a quiet, moving work of art. It got Meyer Street an Oscar nomination and Clint his revenge without saying a word. They haven't seen each other at all since then. Clint saw her as the embodiment of everything he hated about creating movies: doubt, control, and the loss of impulse. You only pull the trigger once in his code, not 50 times. Number 4. Tommy Lee Jones was the alpha Clint couldn't control. Tommy Lee Jones came to the set of In the Line of Fire on the first day. In 1993, Clint Eastwood is said to have leaned over to a crew member and said, "Two bulls in one pen. This will not endure." He was right. At first, everyone assumed they would get along great, but behind the camera, they fought. Jones wasn't the kind of person who liked to follow directions quietly. He yelled, fought, rewrote lines, and kept going long after the word cut. Clint, who ran his setups quietly, calmly, and effectively, couldn't believe what he saw. One technician remembered that he would stay in character between takes. Clint would just look at you and say, "What are you doing?" The most tense part was when the two characters got into a fight. Jones was much taller than Clint and was entirely in character, spitting every phrase with anger. The director roared, "Stop!" But Jones continued going, staring Eastwood right in the eyes. The crew stopped moving. After a long moment, Clint murmured to his assistant, "That kind of theater isn't worth it." Then he left the set. The choice was made from that point on. Clint didn't think twice when casting directors later suggested Jones for Eastwood's next projects. He'd say, "He's a great actor, but we don't speak the same language." In other words, never again. They've never gotten back together, been on the same panel, or even talked about each other in interviews. Eastwood thinks there should only be one alpha, and he's the one who says cut. 5. Richard Burton, the alcoholic who tested Clint's patience to the limit. Clint Eastwood doesn't get angry easily, but Richard Burton almost made him do it. There was no tension on the set of Where Eagles Dare in 1968 because of ego or fame. It was about how hard you worked. Burton was late, garbled his lines, and occasionally smelled like the night before. Clint, who was already up and dressed at daybreak, just stood there and watched him mess up take after take. One crew member said that Clint's face looked like it was losing respect like water. Burton was in the throes of a turbulent marriage to Elizabeth Taylor, and every night ended with him going to a bar. The staff paid for it every morning. Clint didn't yell or give a speech. He waited, cold, quiet, and more disgusted. Clint apparently said, "I'm getting paid by the picture, not by the hour," when Burton said the same thing for the 10th time. The team chuckled uneasily, but Burton didn't. The message got across. Burton was heard telling Eastwood that the movie was a paycheck job, which was the last straw. That hurt. He thought that every movie, even an action movie, should get his whole attention. When Clint was asked about Burton years later, he didn't hold back. "Guy has a lot of talent. Talent that went to waste." That was all he needed to say and all he said. The movie did well, but their romance ended on sight. Clint never worked with him again or talked about him again. Burton's fate was sealed for a man who thinks silence is the best weapon. That's not okay. Number 6 is Jean Seaborg, the woman who made Clint lose his temper. These days, Clint Eastwood doesn't talk about Paint Your Wagon. Jean Seaborg is the answer to that question. She was more than simply his co-star in the 1969 musical. He promised himself that he would never mix work and sympathy again because of her. Seaborg was weak, unreliable, and already being watched by the FBI because of her political activities. Her feelings were all over the place on stage. One day, she'd win over the team with a smile. The next thing she did was lock herself in her trailer for hours. Clint was the other way around, focused, on time, and not a fan of drama. He'd had enough by the 3rd week. She would pause in the middle of a scenario to wonder why she was doing it. A script supervisor remembered. Clint would just look at the floor and wait for her to finish. You could tell he was dying inside. The major damage happened later when Paint Your Wagon failed. Seaborg told the press that Clint's wooden acting made the movie worse. To him, that was the worst form of betrayal, openly condemning a co-worker after he'd worked for months to keep the production together. She was done after that. He never said her name again. He'd change the subject, light a cigar, and walk away whenever anyone brought her up. When word of Seaborg's unfortunate death in 1979 came out years later, Clint didn't say anything. People who knew him say he looked really unhappy, yet he never changed. He once observed quietly, "Some people aren't cut out for the work, and I don't have to deal with it twice." That's the closest he's ever been to forgiving. What do you think? Was it right for Clint Eastwood to cut them out of his life, or did he go too far by not saying anything? Please tell us what you think in the comments.